We'll now begin Concurrent Session 2.1 titled Visions for Northeast Asia. This session will be moderated by Dr. Victor Cha, President of the Geopolitics and Foreign Policy Department and Career Chair at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Dr. Cha, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone, for this session on visions for Northeast Asia. We have about an hour and 20 minutes to take on a very big topic, but I could not have thought of 5 better people to discuss this very big topic. Many of these people are well known to you, but out of respect for the panel, let me properly introduce them. To my immediate left is Dr. Kim Sung-han, who is Professor of International Relations at the Graduate School of International Studies at Korea University. As many of you know, he served as National Security Advisor to the President from 2022 to 2023, and as Vice Minister for Foreign Affairs and Trade from 2012 to 2013. Dr. Kim was also President of the Korean National Committee of the Council on Security Cooperation in the Asia-Pacific, otherwise known as CSCAP. Next to him is Dr. Andrey Kortunov, who was former Director General and Academic Director of the Russian International Affairs Council for well over a decade, from 2011 to 2024. Dr. Kortunov has been member of supervisory committees and boards of trustees for several Russian and international organizations, and he previously served as Deputy Director of the Institute for U.S. and Canada Studies from 1982 to 1995. Next to Dr. Kortunov is Professor Nakabayashi Mieko, Professor of Political Science at Waseda University, served as a member of the Japanese House of Representatives from 2009 to 2012, and held many different positions such as Commissioner of the Fiscal System Council at the Ministry of Finance. And next to Dr. Nakabayashi is Dr. Sheila Smith, who is the Senior Fellow for Asia-Pacific Studies at the Council on Foreign Relations in the United States. She is also a professor in the Asian Studies Department at Georgetown University, well-known expert in Japanese politics and foreign policy, and also serves on the advisory committee for the U.S. Japan network. And last but not least, Professor Su Hao is Emeritus Professor at China Foreign Affairs University. He's President of the Beijing Geopolitical Strategy and Development Association. And Professor Su's expertise is in China's foreign and security policy, strategic studies, international relations in the Asia-Pacific, and East Asian integration. So please, a round of applause for all of our panelists today. So as I said, this panel's discussion is about visions for Northeast Asia, and I would like to start at a very broad level. This panel asks the question of what does Northeast Asia want in the context of a very complicated world of war, tariffs, and great power competition. But I would beg to differ with the premise of the question, because is there really a single Northeast Asian vision? How do the United States, China, Russia, Korea, and Japan think about Northeast Asia? So maybe I could start with that question for all of you, each of you from a different country's expertise. Let me start with my good friend Sung-han. What is South Korea's vision of Northeast Asia?
Thank you for your question. When it comes to vision, I think we need to differentiate between really idealistic kind of ideal vision from the feasible vision. Idealistically speaking, we can think of a peace and reunification of the Korean Peninsula, or realization of multilateral security cooperation mechanism in Northeast Asia, and really the region based on democracy and human rights. So I think this is an ideal vision, but when it comes to feasible vision from the South Korean point of view, of course, we can include the reunification of the Korean Peninsula, but more realistically speaking, we need to come up with managed tension or management of tension on the Korean Peninsula with a view to preventing a war on the Korean Peninsula. At the same time, we need to continue to negotiate with North Korea for the sake of realizing the denuclearization of North Korea. So that is one of the feasible vision. And another one from the Korean perspective is the institutionalization of AJK trilateral partnership, America, Japan, and Korea trilateral partnership, which is on the right track at the moment. But depending on who takes the presidential office, I think this could be changed. I hope it will not change anytime soon, but this is another feasible vision I want to emphasize. And another one is CJK cooperation, China, Japan, and Korea cooperation, which is not to be dispensed, which means AJK partnership actually promoted the CJK cooperation, as we recall, right after the Camp David Trilateral Summit, China actually requested the resumption of CJK Summit, which had been suspended for 4.5 years. That is how CJK Summit took place in May last year. So we, from the Korean perspective, need to manage two triangles in Northeast Asia, AJK triangle and the CJK triangle. But I think we need to put emphasis, obviously, AJK triangle, in a direction of promoting CJK, cooperation. And lastly, I'm hopeful that China and the United States will be able to distinguish the areas of competition from areas of cooperation clearly. Now it is quite blurry. So, I think strategic competition between those two giants will be continuing for at least 30 years, but we still do not know what areas are remaining for cooperation between the two, superpowers. So in that sense, I think Korea hopefully will be able to assist the United States in this direction, which means competition and cooperation can coexist in Northeast Asia, and then the rest of the other countries will be able to, set their own kind of a policy direction better and more clearly. Let me stop there. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Dr. Kortunov, we'd love to hear your thoughts on what is Northeast Asia's vision.
Well, thank you, Dr. Cha. Let me start with a very brief lyrical digression. When I got the invitation to come to this exceptional meeting, I was especially impressed with the title of the conference, which is on the 60 years of Korea-Japan normalization. And I immediately started thinking about the future of relations between Russia and Ukraine. When this fratricidal conflict is behind us, when this war is over, at some point the two nations will have to start rebuilding their relations. And when they talk about reconciliation, they usually refer to the experience of European nations like France and Germany after the Second World War. And though this experience is, of course, very valuable and important, I think that the experience of Japan and Korea might be even more telling. this reconciliation is much more difficult, much more precarious. It had its success stories and failures, its up and downs, but we should definitely keep an eye on this relationship, not only as a page in history, but also as something that can be applied to future developments in our part of the world as well. Now, talking about Russia's position on Northeast Asia specifically, let me start with saying that traditionally, at least since the beginning of the century, Russia is a relatively minority shareholder in this part of the world, tried to position itself as a balancing power. It tried to preserve this balance in terms of North Korea, emphasizing its special relations with Pyongyang on the one hand, but also its commitment to multilateral frameworks in approaching the North Korean nuclear program, specifically the United Nations Security Council resolutions on sanctions against North Korea, and also various multilateral regional settings like the six-party talks. And the second balance was a balance between the intention to develop relations with China as the most important Asian partner of the Russian Federation, and at the same time to keep doors open for economic and arguably also political cooperation with both South Korea and Japan. And today we see that this strategy has been significantly revised. And it is very difficult to imagine Russia prioritizing multilateral frameworks versus bilateral relations with North Korea, which has become much more important partner than ever before for the Russian Federation, or balancing relations with China on the one hand and relations with the Republic of Korea and Japan on the other. Definitely right now we can no longer talk about these balances. Russia tilted towards partnership with North Korea, and it also tilted away from Japan and South Korea because of sanctions imposed on the Russian Federation, and the emphasis on strategic cooperation with Beijing is higher in the system of Russia's foreign policy priorities than ever before. However, having said that, let me make just a couple of caveats to this trend. And I think that this trend has its limits. First of all, Russia is concerned about proliferation. And if you look at the official statements regarding North Korea or regarding Iran or regarding potential proliferators in other parts of the world, this is clearly not in Russia's interests to see more nuclear powers emerging, especially in a volatile and unpredictable region like Northeast Asia. So it sets certain limits on how far Moscow is ready to go in its cooperation with Pyongyang. Second, when we are talking about Russia's partnership with North Korea, definitely Russia will always keep in mind the positions taken in Beijing regarding North Korea, because though Russia has expanded its cooperation with DPRK, but China remains by far the most important national partner of North Korea, and definitely politicians in the Kremlin will do whatever they need not to irritate Beijing, not to create any wrinkles in the relations between Russia and China around North Korea, and specific forms of cooperation with this regime. And the third factor, which I think might also have an impact on Russia's positions regarding the region, is the future of Russia-U.S. relations. Strange things do happen these days. For instance, the United States voted in the UN General Assembly together with Russia and North Korea against a draft resolution proposed by Ukraine and a number of European nations on the Russian-Ukrainian conflict. Right now, there are intense consultations between Moscow and Washington on the ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine, and allegedly there is some progress made on that. Putin has stated that he would support a permanent ceasefire, which is definitely a major step ahead compared to the position that the Russian Federation had earlier. So that might definitely affect Russia's postures in Northeast Asia as well, and that might have an impact on the relations between Moscow and Pyongyang in midterm and longer-term future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Professor Nakabayashi.
Yes.
Japan's view on Northeast Asia, vision
Yes.
for Northeast Asia.
Thank you very much for including me into this panel, and thank you very much for Honorary Chairman John and Asan Institute for holding this excellent symposium. And this panel is so amazing to have such a significant panelist from each country. And I'm from Japan, and this Northeast Asia region is somewhere that Japan cannot move, and had a historic, all sorts of stories and difficulties and success. And Korea is one of the most successful country having independent since 80 years ago. And Japan is increasingly becoming closer to Korea in order to have cooperative relationship. I remember last year at this podium, I talked about extended collective deterrence, and I stated the importance of that kind of collective cooperation. But at the same time, if we talk about visions for Northeast Asia, we really need to find the way to make this region really stable, peaceful, and successful. For a long time after the World War II, we focused on economic growth. And this region is one of the most successful regions to grow economically. However, after a while, China became such a superpower, and Russia also had a conflict in Ukraine. And we found us in such a difficult situation, strategic fragmentation maybe, and war in Ukraine made Russia, North Korea, and China closer than before. And we are so all worried about where our economic prosperity can go. And economic security and digital security and all sorts of themes are now so fragmented, and we haven't found the right way to proceed yet. However, using this opportunity, maybe we can discuss about how our defense budget can be grown so much, and how it can be used wisely, and how we can develop our dialogue toward the future. And from perspective in Japan, interestingly, Prime Minister Ishiba actually met with Mr. Trump, President Trump, in February. And Japanese trade delegation just met with, again, President Trump last week. And it was such an amazing turn of event that President Trump didn't really mention exactly or all detailed things about Northeast Asia yet, at least yet. And we have maybe opportunities to come together, and of course including the United States, and coming up something for the future. For example, having young delegates get together, like young means under 35 or so. We are well beyond it, I am at least, but that kind of things should be planned now. Otherwise, for the long time to come, we do not want to struggle with the similar issues. And our society is becoming more digitalized, and the control is more difficult. And we need a rule-based international order. And I think each panelist here is thinking the same. We need some kind of rule-based order. However, who is leading it? That is very difficult because it is totally connected to domestic politics of each country. And in Japan, the public opinion is somehow ambivalent. For example, looking at U.S. China rivalry, lots of business people and ordinary people are thinking that we do not want to take a side of either one. Somehow, if we could find a better way for a peaceful region, lots of people are thinking we should do that, but there is no specific dialogue or anything like that to pursue for now. And I think in any countries, and Sheila from the United States, of course, the United States government wants Japan to take a side with the United States completely. However, the message is here, of course. However, the ordinary people and business people are wondering whether we should do. Interestingly, Prime Minister Ishiba sent former Prime Minister Kishida to Asian countries. And under this uncertainty of tariffs and international relations, Japan really needs to reconnect it with other Asian countries, not only major countries, but also to find what Japan can do to somehow make up the absence that appears to be in Asian countries and elsewhere, because President Trump somehow terminated lots of international aid to those developing countries. And I heard that Chinese government has kicked in to that vacancy and actually continuing those programs that the United States has developed. And so it is such a tricky time. And it is our choice whether we are heading to fragmented order of this region or some kind of successful bloc as economy and international security, digital security, and so on. So we really need to think toward the future, what kind of organization we can develop, how we can educate younger people and lead them. I think that is the most important thing for this Northeast Asian region as a vision. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor. Now we'll go to Dr. Sheila Smith.
Thank you.
Maybe you can tell us what the U.S. vision of Northeast Asia is.
So I'm in this thank you, Victor, and I also want to thank Chairman Chung and the Asan Institute for including me in this conversation. It is a wonderful opportunity to be with all of you and to hear your thoughts and have this debate about what my country might be doing in the months and the years ahead. I will have to sort of give you a little caveat that I'm not sure I can channel my inner President Trump. So just take what I have to say, not necessarily as a reflection of our current administration, which is too early, I think, to come to conclusive assessments of where this administration wants to take the United States in Northeast Asia or globally. But I thought this idea of a vision for Northeast Asia, and when Victor reframed the questions to all of us panelists, I was a little happy to have the reframing because I wasn't quite sure how to think about a collective vision from the perspective of Washington. So I think, if you think about the American goals as you see our policy expressed in Northeast Asia, there's a long arc of our post-war order. Clearly maintaining peace and stability in Northeast Asia was a priority for successive American governments, Republican or Democrat. This manifested itself in very different ways over time, but really there were the divisions of the nations of Northeast Asia, be it the Korean Peninsula, be be across the Taiwan Straits, clearly was of import to the United States. So you've watched the American strategy evolve around these two flashpoints, but also trying to cope with a new relationship with China from the 1970s forward to try the larger diplomacy of negotiating a Northeast Asia, and in fact a world and a region that would be much more reflective of that engagement, right, and those geostrategic interests. I think today, very much when you're sitting in Washington, the focal point is the evolving military balance. And in fact, the way in which that military balance affects a whole host of our relationships in the region, but also affects our own national security. So it's not so much projected onto Northeast Asia, but really reflected back from the dynamics of Northeast Asia onto American senses of where our strategic competitor is going to emerge from and how we're going to contend with that. So that's one big goal. I think the second goal, and it's not unrelated to the first, but we often collapse it into that first, and I'd like to separate it out, but we made several treaty commitments to allies in the region and to deter aggression against them and to assist them in their defenses should they need it. And I think those treaty commitments give you a slightly different framing from the regional peace and stability goal. I think it's also, nuclear deterrence was clearly, first and foremost, the extension of the nuclear umbrella to non-nuclear allies, Japan and South Korea, was the premise of that relationship from the beginning. The second piece, of course, was to demonstrate, and increasingly in recent decades, to demonstrate the viability of that extended deterrent to the people of both societies, Japanese and South Koreans, was very important in our strategy. And you see that in not only where we put certain weapons systems, but also, as Kirk Campbell was discussing this morning, different ways of expressing our continued commitment to that nuclear role, that strategic nuclear role in deterrence. And then finally, I think in the last decade or so, largely in response to first the DPRK and its ambitions, its nuclear ambitions, and second to China's increasing military capability and the deployment of that capability, you saw us working through with both South Korea and Japan ways to integrate our defensive capabilities, to integrate our thinking on deterrence and our strategy around that deterrent mission. And so I think you've seen both of those goals, both of those U.S. goals continue to be central to the way that we interact, to the way that we see our particular role in the region. It doesn't necessarily add up to a vision. It excludes a lot of the diplomacy that we might think about as we think about visions looking forward. But I think it would be a mistake not to emphasize that these two particular goals of the United States continue to define our engagement here in Northeast Asia, not only to our alliance partners, but also to others in the region that we're trying to figure out how to move forward with as we go forward. So let me stop there, Victor. It's not so much visions, it's goals and strategic policy.
Great, thank you very much, Sheila. Professor Suhao, what is China's vision of Northeast Asia?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Charles. You're sitting here as the moderator reminded me many years ago. You also was the moderator for me, right, in a similar panel, right? So that means always making me remind something before. Even last year, I was sitting in the same chair talking about the similar topic, right? But I remember last year, my point is that there's no existence of the so-called South Triangle and North Triangle. Of course, today we're talking something about the trilateral, in Northeast Asia, United States, Japan, South Korea. But I'm pleased to see that there's no discussion about so-called North Triangle. I mean, Russia, China, and North Korea. So it's good. That means there's no any signal to remind us that there's some kind of Northern Triangle, right, against the South Triangle. So that's good symbol, the process, I think. No, so regarding the vision of Northeast Asia, I would like to give 4 words to define my vision. The first is the hedging engagement. I noticed that in this morning session, some presenters are talking a lot about the engagement. Like North Korea, like South Korea would like to engage with China to change the previous 2 years format and try to look for some possibility for engagement with each other in North and South, between South Korea and China. Of course, China and Japan already in recent 2 years, regarding your new prime minister, already engaged quite a lot discussing about how to enhance the bilateral cooperation, in particular economic and societal engagement. Of course, United and China, even though we have some serious problem, but we also have quite a lot of interaction with each other, right? In the Biden administration, of course, I'm quite sure in new administration, we will take the chance to have engagement with each other regarding the trade issue, economic issue, but even to maintain the status quo across the Taiwan Strait and South China Sea, right? So I think that we have a chance to engage with each other. So, of course, there's some engagement prepares some uncertainty. So there's a hedging engagement for all of us. And the second word I would like use like this, peaceful coexistence. I know that in Joe Biden administration, senior officers already quite a lot discussing about how to redefine Chinese-American relation with the world coexist with China, right? It is very interesting to me that remind my previous research. I remember 20 years ago when I was in the Columbia University as a Fulbright scholar, I do some kind of material searching. I try to know how American academia, in particular as policy researcher, to use coexistence to define American foreign policy. But it makes me disappointed that almost there's no single word in American Academy of Policy Researcher, policy paper, to use the coexistence to explain American foreign policy. But I'm pleased to see that American senior officers recent years always use the coexist to define Chinese-American relations. So I think even now, maybe it's more important to keep our coexist with each other between China and the United States, of course, with other members in Northeast Asia. So peaceful coexistence, I think that's very important. In this regard, I don't think there's any obvious condition for the war in Korean Peninsula, on the Korean Peninsula or in Northeast Asia, even across the Strait of Taiwan. So I'm quite sure that we can keep the peaceful pattern to define our relation in Northeast Asia. So the third word I would like to say that could be the economic orientation. Maybe in the previous administration of the United States, much more focus on, this is my point, on the military and security. Even in the last year, in this Asan Plenum in 24, talking quite a lot about security and military. So this is Asan's character, right? But after Donald Trump getting into power, maybe economic much more important to define all our relation with each other. Of course, the United States at the moment, unfortunately, wages so-called the tariff war with others, including American allies, across the Atlantic, or maybe across the Pacific, with Japan, South Korea, of course, more serious against China. So there's much more focus on the economic. But in Chinese, where they're saying that when we're talking the money, it's easier to resolve. Not the military, not the security. But if you use the money to resolve the problem, maybe somehow easier, all right? So I think that maybe in the foreseeable future, we'll have more space for negotiation, for discussion, or for making a deal with all the members around the Northeast Asia and Asia Pacific, including the United States with China. And the fourth word, I would say that from Chinese, if we define our Chinese foreign policy in the region of Northeast Asia, I would like to use the word, the engagement, or in integrated diplomacy. Integrated diplomacy. As a Chinese policy researcher, in the past even 30 years, I much more focused on my research work about Northeast Asia in general, including Northeast Asia. So in the past 20 years, China tried to encourage the regional cooperation in East Asia for the goal of East Asian community build-up. Yeah. So I noticed that this morning we're talking quite a lot about the trilateral cooperation, but this new, quite new trilateral among United States, Japan, and South Korea. But there are already quite a long time trilateral cooperation in this region. That is China, Japan, and South Korea. So since 1999, we already have the informal summit or luncheon time, right? And now this year will be the 20th summit between about China, Japan, and South Korea. Maybe it will be happening in Japan this year, right? Last year in South Korea. So in their discussion among three of us, we already discussed quite a lot our common ground for the sharing the interest or the win-win cooperation economically fields, and even try to enhance their supply chain and the production chain among us. So I think this year, China much more focused on East Asian cooperation. Yeah, tell you the truth, I just came back from Vietnam 2 days ago, right? So I also travel a little bit around the Southeast Asia. So you know, Chinese President Xi Jinping visited Vietnam, Malaysia, and Cambodia, right? So we talked quite a lot about the regional cooperation in Southeast Asia, or we call it 10+1, ASEAN plus China. But there's another 10+1, plus Japan and plus South Korea. So when I was in Vietnam, there's quite a lot of investment from Korea, South Korea, and Japan. But now they welcome more about China. So that means we can engage into the Southeast Asia among three of us. Of course, in Northeast Asia, you know, so economically, we try to build the supply chain and production chain. Also, somehow, frankly speaking, maybe facing the economic challenge from the United States regarding the tariff problem, right? So China, Japan, and South Korea will also share something more, right, regarding our economic cooperation. Of course, plus Russia. Economically, Russia engaged quite a lot with China. So I think that's, in the foreseeable future, I'm relatively positive to predict the future of Northeast Asia. So maybe I have the one word to conclude my points. That would be the new balance or rebalance in Northeast Asia, right? Of course, we have the trilateral among United States, Japan, and South Korea, but we still keep the momentum of another trilateral, China, Japan, and South Korea. And this is the first balance of these two trilateral pattern. Yeah. And the second rebalance, that means the continental of East Asia and the maritime of Indo-Pacific, right? Of course, we have some problem or some discussion about in circle around China. But China has very deep relations with Indo-Pacific member, like so-called Quad member, right? So economically and even societally, so China opens our visa to many countries in the region. So that means continental and maritime could be keep the balance, interact with each other. And the third new balance or rebalance, that means there are advanced country and developing country. In the G7 and Global South, China encouraged quite a lot about their, the bloc, BRICS mechanism build up, and even the BRIC plus other developing countries. Not only just their, big emerging power interaction with each other, but have the other developing countries engaged into this kind of platform. So I think that maybe regarding the developed country in the framework of G7, and another in the Global South, in the platform of BRICS. So maybe we can work in a similar direction, take their major platform, that is G20, together. So maybe later this year in the G20, so China will be enhance our cooperative relation with other partners in its two new balance. So that's my point. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Really an excellent first round of interventions. Before I move to the next question, I wanted to see if there is anybody who wished to comment on anything anybody else has said thus far. Okay. Oh, you're all very polite. Okay. Let's move to the next. A number of you have mentioned in your vision of Northeast Asia the importance of order, rules-based order, global governance. But I think we'd all agree that right now we're in a period of time when there's a lot of disorder. Global governance institutions are underperforming. The UN Secretary General himself recently was quoted as saying that he cannot do his job because the UN Security Council cannot act, whether it comes to Ukraine or Gaza or Syria. The United States has ripped a giant hole in the global trading system with reciprocal tariffs. The dollar is being challenged as the reserve currency. And of course there is, some would call it the return of great power competition, but there is clearly competition among great powers in Northeast Asia and in the international system. So I guess the question I have for all of you is who benefits and who loses from the current global disorder? Is there an alternative order that's being built out of this disorder, or is it just disorder? Sung-Han.
Well, first of all, President Trump is not very much interested in lead so-called the liberal international order. So we often say liberal international order has been being led by the United States, but for now it seems he has a different view. Maybe this order appears to be coming out of this kind of a perception gap. By the way, who are the winners and losers for this global disorder? I think the first winners will be China and Russia. Many of American pundits are calling them revisionist states. By the way, out of this global disorder, it seems to me Russia is expanding its own influence in Ukraine, and also China is also expanding its own sphere of influence in Eurasian continent through BRI. So I think that's the first winners. And the second winner group is the regional leaders of the Global South. Professor Su Hao briefly mentioned the importance of the Global South. Such countries as Saudi, India, and Turkey. Turkey is buying Russian weapons, even if Turkey is a member state of NATO. So, swing states are benefiting out of this, global disorder. And even India engages with both, Quad and also BRICS. So this symbolizes the swing status of India. And also Saudi is trying to mediate between Iran and Israel while trying to court both the United States and China. So those swing states, or if I may, the leaders of Global South are benefiting out of this global disorder. And also North Korea. North Korea is benefiting out of this global disorder. I think even before Trump was inaugurated, UN Security Council was virtually paralyzed because China and Russia vetoed many Security Council resolutions to quote-unquote punish North Korea for its repeated provocations. Nevertheless, I think some other alternatives didn't work out. So North Korea continues to work on improving its nuclear and missile capabilities with impunity. So they are winners. On the other hand, the losers include the liberal democracies, liberal democratic countries. President Trump does not distinguish, the allies from, the competitors in the name of, transactional diplomacy. So the line of distinction is getting blurred. So in that sense, the allies are suffering from kind of a identity crisis. So that is, particularly the European allies, they are suffering from this kind of identity crisis while having serious kind of retrenchment fears of the United States and many other losers, such as fragile states in the global south. And also at the same time, multilateral institutions are losers too. UN and many WHO and WTO, no doubt about it. They are definitely, losing under current disorderly situation. Of course, they need to reform themselves to better fit into liberal international order if they really desire to restore liberal international order. But for now, definitely they are losing out of this global disorder. Let me stop there.
Yeah, thank you. Dr. Kortunov, your thoughts?
Let me try to offer a more radical perspective on this question. I think that though some specific leaders might gain by the disorder which is mounting, but if you take longer-term prospects, there'll be no winners because all countries need a stable international environment in order to development. They need predictability and some norms in which they can operate safely. And unfortunately, with the current developments, I think there'll be no winners, but only losers. The question is how we can get back to global governance and what specific mechanisms can be used in order to reverse the current unfortunate trends. Many say that we need something like another 1945, another big deal between major players in order to set new rules of the game. I personally do not believe in this option. I think, first of all, in order to have a grand bargain, you need to have a grand war preceding this bargain. And this is something that we simply cannot afford because a new world war is likely to be lethal to all of us. And second, it's a question of legitimacy because after the end of the Second World War, the victorious nations had enough credit to make their claim to take special responsibility for the emerging global order. That's why we got the United Nations Security Council and countries with veto powers. I don't think that major nations have such legitimacy today. And I think that midterm powers and small powers would definitely challenge any grand bargain or any big deal that major players might reach. That's why I personally tend to believe that the only way to approach the problem of global governance should be not the top-down approach, but rather the bottom-up approach. It means that we should start rebuilding global governance, not from designing new institutions or trying to reform the United Nations, which will be extremely difficult to do, but to agree on small, relatively technical, maybe non-toxic issues where this agreement is not beyond our reach. And only gradually we can move from what I would call situational multilateralism or minilateralism to something more ambitious, something more strategic, something that would help us to move the global governance and the regional governance to a new level. This is a long road, and I think it will be a very bumpy road given the current trends, but I simply do not see another way out of the situation if the humanity really wants to survive and to prosper, especially if we're thinking about the second half of this century, with mounting common pressures like the climate change and international migrations and resource crunches and many other common problems, and also the growing interdependence and interconnectedness between various nations and regions of the world. Thank you.
Thank you. President Nakabayashi.
Yes. Hi. Thank you very much for mentioning the big deal thing. And it is one of our scariest thoughts if, for example, President Trump would come to Russia on the 9th of May to make a big deal, although it is not, I think, foreseeable for now. And President Trump is busy with all sorts of negotiations. However, just in case if Premier Xi Jinping comes to Russia on the 9th of May, is he going, by the way?
Yeah,
right? He is invited.
Yeah.
And if Mr. Trump would go there, we just wondered as an intellectual thoughts what would happen there after and while trying to stop the war in Ukraine. But it doesn't seem to be realized soon. So I have to say that the term or thoughts of disorder depends on the leadership. And these days, President Trump is criticized that he is somehow making this world such a weak and fragmented place. However, at the same time, we should really thank the United States for keeping the international order for such a long time, particularly after the World War II, and providing so much common good to the world, like human rights, foreign assistance, all sorts of things, and military assistance and security through alliances and all sorts of things. But unfortunately, the United States is not as big enough as we used to know. And relatively, the power is declining. In that world, we, I think, need to seek for collective leadership, because one country cannot exercise enough leadership. And collective leadership should be truly based on rules. However, in this world, it is very difficult just to agree with the basic rules. For example, we think about the United Nations. How come we can come to agree on certain things like stopping war in Ukraine or Gaza? Also, it is very difficult if we think about WTO. It used to have a good spirit and functioned pretty well. But after China joined, and China declared as a developing country, and then utilizing all sorts of goodness of that kind of organization, and somehow developed so fast after joining the World WTO. And somehow the United States realized WTO is not the tool for a completely fair, rule-based organ. That kind of things is making us so devastated, while we really need the rule-based order and collective leadership. I think we can find somehow, if we have a dialogue with likely-minded people from different countries. And I think China is playing a huge role. And the United States is also reflecting the action and attitude of China so far. Maybe India is becoming part of it, but so far China is such a huge, I think, actor in the world.
Okay, thank you. Sheila.
So much good commentary already. I don't want to. I think there's a lot on the table here. I don't know right now. Yes, we're in an era of disorder. So to get to your last part of your question first, I don't think we have an emerging new order. I don't think we know what we are in now, but we're definitely. I think there's general agreement. We're definitely in a moment where the old order is being deeply challenged, right? And I'm not sure we can go backwards. Part of it is major power competition. So the rise of Chinese power and influence, not only in terms of the Indo-Pacific and military power, but it's just global influence economically, socially, and otherwise. We don't have to put, we don't have to, I will talk badly about my own country in just a second, but we don't have to put a bad spin on Chinese power at the moment, but it's clear that China is trying to recast some of the global institutions that have existed for good or bad reason, but mostly just because it's seeking its own interests. I think the other story, and I like Sun Han's sort of country-by-country approach, but the other story is the regional. So I think what's been so surprising since the Russian invasion of Ukraine is that we're in this moment of war, first in Europe and now in the Middle East, right? Sustained war and conflict in a way that I don't think many of us imagined was possible, really. And that has had also winners and losers. So I'm thinking here, and I was in Europe, obviously Ukraine is the loser. But so too are the Baltic states, so too are a lot of states that are bordering Russia. They are worried, right? They're asking for NATO membership. They're mobilizing their publics to be prepared. So there is a sense of anxiety. They may not be losers in that sense of the word, but there's an increasing sense of anxiety of the countries that border Russia, which I think is obviously a problem. I don't know whether to put Europe and the EU generally in a win or lose situation, but definitely an upset situation. I think was wise for us to recognize just how much Europeans now have to think differently about their own security, and not just because of Russia, but also because of us, right? In the Middle East, Iran has been a huge loser. Iranian power has been deeply diminished. And so I think that was not obvious when Israel was invaded on October 7th. It wasn't obvious when Israeli forces destroyed Gaza, but Iran has been the big loser of that conflict, I think, in terms of its Middle Eastern position. Syria, I don't know if we think of Syria as a winner or a loser, but Assad, certainly a loser. Syria, a story as yet untold. I don't know that I see big losers in the Indo-Pacific, and so I think we don't have the same circumstances. We're not in conflict. We're not at the moment where you see some very big, obvious losers. But major power competition really gets us very focused on what China's doing, what Russia's doing, and what we're doing. And everybody around has to accommodate, adjust, negotiate tariffs and other kinds of things. And I think that's the new reality. I'm not sure we can put winners and losers labels on that, but it is certainly a challenge, I imagine, for policymakers in Seoul. I know better Tokyo's stresses and strains, right? And our European allies as well. I think I'll speak solely about the United States' experience. I think right now we are the big loser, and it's a self-inflicted wound in some ways. It may turn out that we may not be a loser at the end of the game. I don't know. But I don't see us at the moment becoming out or emerging as a huge winner. Now, again, if Mr. Trump is is the artist of the deal and manages to reinvigorate American manufacturing industry and so on and so forth, maybe that'll be a different outcome. But I feel, as a U.S. citizen anyway, I feel a little bit like we may be on the losing end of this, partly because of our own decision-making. The last piece, and everybody's been mentioning it, but I just wanted to put it in the category, Victor, is the global institutions. I think global institutions, I don't know winner or loser is the right language, but they're seriously under threat. The United Nations has never been the premier organization of global governance. It's always had its problems, but I think today the Security Council has been neutralized as a place to go for a problem-solving institution. It is no longer functional. And your quote, Victor, about the Secretary General is really apt here. The Bretton Woods institutions may suffer through because they actually have utility. They will be, more vulnerable to Chinese influence, as is right. But they will be, I think, what countries will want them to be. So I don't see the Bretton Woods institutions, with the one obvious exception Nakabayashi Sensei pointed out, which is the WTO. I think, in conclusion, though, I think it might be useful, not today in this panel, but to continue to think about what our expectations are of major power dynamics, major power competition. We're all beginning to use this phrase, and I was really taken, I think Minister Cho at the beginning was referencing, we haven't seen this dynamic, not only in Northeast Asia, but globally, since the pre-war era. And I think that historical reference is in our minds, but it would be useful for future Asan discussions to examine a little bit more carefully what we think of when we think of major power competition. Is it always bad? Does it always lead to war? Are spheres of influence the natural outcome? There's a lot of assumptions in the kind of conventional wisdom at the moment, and it's certainly a topic for any PhD students or aspiring PhD students in the audience, because I think it's important that we get a little bit more clarity on what we mean by that.
Great. Professor Su-Hao.
All right. Yeah, so when we're talking about the competition, maybe ultimately that is the winner or loser, right? But I think it's not very easy to give this kind of clear answer. Who will be the winner or the loser, right? Maybe I would like to give a wise answer. I mean, that's in this context of the trade problems or even tariff issue, all of us are losers. Including the United States, right? China, of course, frankly speaking, will suffer somehow because the high tariff that's make China internal economic, how to keep our resilience. Economic resilience is still big challenges, and how to enhance our, we call the supply chain with our neighborhood is also facing some challenges, uncertainties. So of course, we are the loser in China, but of course, plus others, our neighborhood, Korea, Japan, or some countries in Southeast Asia, including Vietnam. I just went there 2 days ago. They also feels very much anxious and worried about that. So we are all the losers, all right, in this context. But in other words, maybe we are all the winners, all right? Because after this, the Cold War, even the problems between Russia and Ukraine. But now Donald Trump tried to reset the pattern among the big powers. Maybe somehow, if we change the logic among the big powers relations, not just define on the security or military. If we just focus on the economic relation with each other, of course, in the background of the high-tech, advanced at this moment, maybe we'll try to create kind of the so-called blue ocean for us to enhance our engagement with each other. Of course, some kind of benign competition between us, like China and United States, high tech. By this way, I think that we have kind of the match called field and track match, not a boxing match, all right? Hit the other down and become the winner. So in this way, we all could get some kind of benefits with each other. So regarding the order or disorder, it is very interesting to us that somehow in the previous time, in the past years, when talking about so-called rule-based, so make Chinese feel that we'll be criticized by others, right, or in the mass media. But now when we're talking about the rule-based, maybe somehow Americans on this way to be criticized, right? Because the United States already changed some kind of rules, right? So, but I think that's in this region of Northeast Asia or East Asia as a whole, China still encourages the regional integration in East Asia or in Asia Pacific. So we talk quite a lot about the integration in East Asia for the community building, or the FTA Asia Pacific in APEC framework, yeah? So in this framework, I think that could be enhance our cooperation based upon our regional rule, is my point. Thank you.
Great, terrific. Well, I want to give a chance if anybody wants to respond to anything they've heard thus far.
Actually, I didn't have a chance to respond to your second question about kind of alternative order.
Yeah.
Actually, my gut feeling is that current disorder is likely to be regionalized, but hopefully in each region, a balance of power is to be maintained. So if I talk to the pundits who are sympathetic with the Trump administration, if I summarize, they are more interested in regionalized order, where the balance of power is maintained in Europe, balance of power maintained in the Middle East, balance of power is maintained in Indo-Pacific, but primarily United States is willing to invest its own political capital in the Indo-Pacific, and the rest of the others in Europe or in the Middle East, they need to share more burden so that a balance of power will be maintained if they are really, want peace and stability over there. So that's my answer, probably a tentative answer.
Okay.
But if Democratic Party retakes the White House in 3 years, no, 4 years, right? Or 2.5 years? I don't know. Democratic Party will try to restore liberal international order as President Biden did after Trump 1.0. I think a more responsible kind of shareholding on the part of the United States. So that kind of thing is thinkable for now. We don't have to be frustrated too much with the chaotic situation at the moment. Yeah.
I saw Sheila not shaking her head like
Sorry.
Go ahead.
So kind of it has this expectation of where the Democratic Party is going to come back. I mean, what's interesting for me, and again, this is a very speculative comment, so I'm not sure I should be saying it in public, but I think the fact that the American people voted President Trump back into office a second time suggests that we should be paying attention to a change in perspective of the American people about the kind of, not necessarily foreign policy, but the kind of governance that they're asking for. And I say that as neutrally as I possibly can. But I think you also have to see, coming out of that last presidential election, on the Democratic side, you'll have to watch and see how the Democrats evolve. I don't think it's very obvious that you'll get a Biden-type government coming back if the Democrats come back in. You may have a very different kind of Democratic Party with different kinds of priorities, domestic priorities. I can't really imagine at this point what a Bernie Sanders AOC foreign policy would look like, but I wouldn't underestimate the fact that the Democrats are going to go through a thought process that may not produce a Biden-like return on the international stage.
if you go far enough to the right and far enough to the left,
That
they
maybe we'll
eventually
come back
converge, yeah.
eventually, and our grandchildren
right.
will. But I think there is an evolution going on here, and I'm not sure how the Democrats are going to come out.
And it is always true that domestic politics is the international relations itself.
Yeah.
And the U.S. Currently going through like a soul-searching process, right? Particularly the Democratic Party hasn't found what kind of position the United States should take in this world order. And once they come up with something, it could change this region, Northeast Asia, and impacting South Korea, Japan, even Russia, China, and so on. So it is so important to watch American people, particularly the Democratic side, who will be the next candidate, whether the person can win American mind or not. Because that is the true, I think, new international order to be suggested.
You should have presented on American. I could have presented
Oh,
on...
yes, maybe you can switch around. Yeah, as
No,
we
but it's
usually
true.
do.
I think there's a debate underneath the politics at the moment that is worth paying attention to in the United States.
Sure, sure.
I think so.
Yes?
Yeah, when we're talking about the visions of the Northeast Asia, this is regional or international. But it seems to me that there's the common phenomenon for all of us in the region members. We are much more inward rather than outward.
Right.
United States, Korea, China, and of course China, try to how to find a way to keep our internal momentum for their resilience or for the stability or even for the benign governance internally and national-wise is very important for us. So in this regard, I would say that all of us could be shared common ground. How to keep our internal stability and prosperity. It's very important for us. So, and then focus on this kind of internal needs, maybe we can broaden our external cooperation. So these are my points.
Andrey, did you want to say anything on that?
Well, just one more point on the balance of powers. I think that one of the problems that we are likely to confront is that the balance of powers is becoming increasingly ambiguous and very hard to define. If you take this country, for instance, South Korea, is it a small country, a medium-sized country, or a great power? It depends on the specific area that you would like to focus on. It might be relatively small in terms of its territory, in terms of its population, but it is definitely not a small player in terms of modern high tech. So that suggests that we will not have a kind of integrated hierarchy of powers in years to come, but instead of this hierarchy, we will have multiple balances. And I think the art of statecraft would be to manage these various balances in a way that they do not contradict each other. Of course, when we get to the times of uncertainty, it is primarily the hard power which matters. But these times will not last forever, which implies that other dimensions of national power might get to the fore before too long. And I think that all of us should be ready to play on various chessboards with very different rules. And that will what will make the international relations of the future so different from the international system of the past, which was more or less linear, where we could define specific positions for each nation or each group of nations within the system. I don't think that we will have this luxury in the future. Thank you.
Russia is not a small power, right?
Well, that depends. If you take international trade, it is smaller than South Korea.
Right.
Let's face it.
So it's,
Again, whether it is good or bad, it's another question, but that's reality.
So I was trying to think of a good way to end this panel, and I think it might be to ask the question, and I only ask for a one-word answer, to ask the question, when we come back here a year from now, do you think our conversation will be better or worse than it is today?
You mean in terms of pessimism or optimism?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
probably we will be discussing upcoming midterm elections of the United States.
Okay. Okay. All right.
And the impact of the result upon the whole world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Andrey.
I think that in a year from now, hopefully we will have more clarity than we have today. And that means that it will be easier to come up with our diagnosis of the international system and maybe even to give more specific advice to decision makers on our next steps.
I agree. We might have better clarity in 1 year. But if I need to predict, I think things are getting better. I am optimistic. And all the players will be realizing things so extreme wouldn't work and somehow trying to find compromises. That is something that we should hope for, I think. And our diagnosis will be a little better for the future.
Sheila.
Oh, goodness gracious. I don't know, I'm living in Washington, D.C., so I'm not so optimistic. So, no, I think there's certain events, Victor, that I think we'll see a year from now with clarity. I don't know if we'll be clear about the meta questions you were asking us. So one is, political change here in Seoul will shape the Japan-Korea relationship. So my hope is, I'm optimistic perhaps on this, that Japan and South Korea will be able to continue to move forward, make progress in that partnership. So that's my optimism right there. I think we'll find out whether or not President Trump is able to negotiate a ceasefire with the Russians and the Ukrainians. That will be huge for whatever major power dynamics, but it will certainly change the situation in Europe, and it'll change the U.S. relationship with Russia. I don't know how, but I hope some way we get to that outcome of peace, but I'm not sure that it's going to be optimistic or negative at that point. There is talk of a trade deal with China. If we come back here next year and President Xi and President Trump have reached an accord on a bilateral trade deal, I'm not sure Japan will be happy or the spillover effects will be, but it will take a lot of this economic uncertainty, I think, a little bit off the table.
Yeah.
So there's reasons for optimism, but there's also reasons for, I don't know.
Okay.
All right, yeah. Well, somehow I'm optimistic
There you go.
to predict this year ahead. The first, I would say that the tension over the Korean Peninsula could be reduced, in particular because Donald Trump maybe somehow could have once again engaged with North Korea. It could be possible, so that will reduce the tension over this peninsula. The second, there will be some kind of summit, different kind of summit taking place in this region, right? There will be the APEC summit. So I'm somehow quite sure that our President Xi Jinping could be here in Korea, right? Not only just for the summit, but maybe a state visit to South Korea. So we resume our cooperative relation with each other. And of course, there will be another summit in Japan, the China Summit, right? So China, Japan, South Korea will be discussing about the regional cooperative behavior. And of course, the last, I hope, maybe somehow could be sure that there will be a summit between China and the United States here in Korea, by side of the summit of APEC, right? Because every summit, there will be the bilateral summit, right, between our two countries. So every summit between China and the United States all have the important things happen, to redefine or to escalate our stabilize the relation with each other. So I'm optimistic for that.
But just a footnote, if DPK wins the upcoming elections of Korea, we will be discussing kind of a review session about how DPK administration has been influencing visions of Northeast Asia, if I may.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, really excellent panel, really wonderful thoughts and conversation. Please give our panelists a round of applause.